Back of the truck's a mess. This needs to be cleaned up. I'm gonna get my son on this tomorrow. I got this week off by choice. I've been on the road for 5 weeks. I'll travel like 5, 6 consecutive days away from home each time. So I passed on a one-day job this week. It was one travel day and one shoot day, and travel home late the night of the shoot. I just need like one full week to reset, and I get back to it. This Sunday is a travel day for the start of next week. So first up in my lineup for 2024, Sony FX3. I keep the 24-70 on there semi-permanently. I only use this for B-roll and almost exclusively on the gimbal. I've only had it on the tripod a couple of times this year, and each time it's been a lock-off shots. A lot of people on my vlog ask why I don't use this more as an A-cam, and I'll get into the particulars when I get to my next camera. But I would say one feature on like a Mark II is if this had internal ND, it doesn't have to be variable, just selectable ND like the Blackmagic Pocket Pro, is that what it's called? I would use this quite a bit more, but just having the throw screw on NDs on it, just enough of a barrier of resistance that I go for my bigger cameras. Sony FX9. I pre-ordered this camera Q4 2019. Came in, I think, late January 2020. Sat for a couple months before I got it out and working. This was a replacement for my C300 Mark I, which I was shooting. I had 2 of them, mostly for interview work, cable TV as well as corporate. At that point in time, most of my clients were shooting 1080, so I didn't have the pressure to upgrade to the C300 Mark II. Or whenever the Mark III came out, kind of same situation. And prior to the C300s, I was shooting on Sony cams for all my mid-range work, so I was kind of familiar with the menus and everything and totally comfortable to go back to it. So this is my only camera that doesn't travel in a case. This stays assembled and clipped onto the top shelf of my tool chest and just lives in the van. So I can get a phone call for a same-day assignment and just jump in the van and go and have a picture up within seconds. Quick accessory rundown for news and documentary filmmaking. I run a dual battery plate on the back so that I can hot swap and just have extended run times. Also balances the camera better on my shoulder with bigger PL lenses. Viewfinder extension tube, square tube, I forget the name of the company, Rigid Designs. And then I recently added the mid-49 12-inch EVF extension cable. Just got a Rode shotgun. Inexpensive onboard monitor. My son just 3D printed some caps for me. And then I've got electro dual channel audio receiver on the side here. Shape handle extension, move cam accessories, VCT pad. And then, let's see, carabiners so that I can clip a shoulder strap on specific to news. I gotta do a bunch of walking in a city. And then discontinued but small rig clip-on mat box that actually fits the 28 to 135. And I use this exclusively for the eyebrow, always being on the camera. So if I am doing a quick man on the street interview or a live shot with the sun in the background, I can quickly cut the flare. Next up is a second FX9, configured the same by default, but with less accessories. I don't remember what year I picked this up, if it was 21 or 22. The FX6 had just started shipping, and I was thinking of buying a 6, but they were back ordered sort of indefinitely. I think it was 2021. And I had multiple projects stacked up that required 2 matching cameras in UHD. So I bought a second 9, and as it's played out, it was actually the better decision because I have a large collection of Super 35 PL lenses, and the FX6, when cropped in Super 35, I believe it doesn't record at UHD, you can only do 1080. So having 2 matching cameras that will do Super 35 or full frame in UHD has been very valuable for me. And then some of the broadcasting cable shows, they'll call and specify FX9s. Getting more calls for the 6s. I think I've only missed like 1 assignment not having a 6, and they were adamant I couldn't sub in a 9. But the inverse is much more common, requests for 9s specifically. Also, these cameras can record a interlace 5994 image, and that may sound crazy to you, but majority of cable news, or all of the cable news here in the US, is still shooting either 720p or 1080. 1080i. My main news client is 1080i, so having a camera that shoots internally in interlace has been an important aspect of my business. Minimal accessories on the second 9, just a gold mount plate on the back, VCT shoulder pad, no handle extension. Normally this has a shotgun mic installed, but I borrowed it for another project. I got a reset, and then the 28 to 135 lives by default on the B camera. I do have PL mounts for both of these cameras. The most controversial camera of 2024, the Burano. I've only had mine for a few months, but it's pretty much paid off in jobs. Not in direct rentals, but if I take the total billings on those shoots, me owner op, I've exceeded the purchase cost of the camera and the basic accessories I have up to this point. I'm still struggling with finding the best VCT base. I'm down to either Bright Tangerine or Vocus. You can see in some of my previous videos, I purchased a small rig, a Zacuto, and the Ari accessories. They were all too heavy and too much stack height for me. So following Seattle cinematographer Chris Bell's advice, should have listened to him from the very start, and went with a Dovetail Movcam base for now. It's reasonably priced, and Chris checked for me, thank you, that a RE BP8 or BP9 studio base bridge plate lines up at the proper stack height, because I've got a 10:1 big studio zoom back there that requires studio rod height. For the type of work I do, and having come up in broadcast TV with E&G cameras on my shoulder and like camera chain cameras, I prefer this shape of camera, long and narrow, to offset bigger lenses when it's riding on my shoulder. Burano's more of a cinema style. These cube cameras are super popular for, I guess, gimbals and smaller car mounts and stuff. And yeah, I get it. It's just kind of not my thing. I'd be most happy with just a traditional 2/3 inch E&G cam with a wide and a standard zoom that open up to a 1.9. Client demands are different than what the cameraman wants. So I would like to buy a second one, and that was my original plan. I was going to sell the two FX9s, and then I sold an Amira earlier this year, and the proceeds from the sale of those 3 cameras would pay for a second Burano. But then I got busy on projects where the FX9s are working, and I had a big week-long shoot where I had the 3, the 2 9s, and the Burano on the show. So the short of it is these 2 FX9s are working faster than they are depreciating, which is generally the case with all the cameras I've purchased. So there isn't really an incentive to sell them, other than I'm confident any FX9 request, I could substitute a Burano and everyone would be thrilled. So at the point, I don't know, I'll probably list those for sale in the coming months, but I also don't want to buy any more gear this year. Next up, the vintage, still makes a great picture, Sony EX3. I have 2 of these. This one camera, year to date, I've worked more days, earned more money with this camera than the FX3. I'm using it exclusively for news, live coverage. The only upgrades I've made to it were this year I bought a gold mount adapter. This is actually an FX6 adapter that fits. And then I just had to buy a different P-tap cable to send 12 volts to the camera versus the, is it 19.5, comes out of the FX6. It's a different connector that doesn't physically fit. So fortunately there's no risk of blowing anything up by patching the wrong cable. I need to zip tie that inside. Then the only other change, did this years ago on these cameras, is I have the S/S to SD card adapters, so I can shoot SD cards. 5+ years ago, these cameras were my preferred choice for any conference work where I'm covering speakers on stage from the back of the room, in like a ballroom, have like a close follow cam and a wide shot, or 2 follow cams, or however it would play out. And then for those kinds of jobs, I just purchase inexpensive SD cards and physically hand off the cards to the client at the end of each day versus having to make offloads and backups. And then the second application for these were like live webcast, live switch situations. I did use these, I don't know if it was this year or late last year, for a little 2-camera switch with my Blackmagic switcher. Same thing, just covering presenters on a stage, but specifically for web. And then I got some gaff tape on the eyepiece loop because it broke probably 10 years ago. But this year, this camera's been out working, covering live news. I spent several weeks down on the border in Eagle Pass, just feeding a live bunk shot to the network. They would want me to have a picture up for like 4 to 8 or more consecutive hours. Just always a live picture framed on something interesting that they could cut to without warning as coverage. And I didn't want to have my FX9 out there in the sun and the heat and the dust and the risk of it getting knocked over or wet. And the 12x zoom has got a lot more range than the 28 to 135 on a big sensor camera. So happy I kept these cameras around, found a second life for them. Getting the Burano configured for my next shoot. I get the record settings from the client, and I've got some presets saved into the camera. We're going to be 1080 record, Cinetone 23/9/8. Camera is prepped for the next project. Shooting AVC-L 1080. Got a single channel Sony receiver going to channel 1. Onboard mic channel 2. I've got like it's not a news assignment. I'm working for a PR firm. It's a corporate thing, but it's an event with kind of like a press conference environment. I don't think they're gonna have a remote box, but there is a PA system. So I got that receiver prepped with a block transmitter. My plan is I'll plug this into the mixing board. I gotta make sure I have a 1/4-inch phono plug to XLR because the aux out on the mixer may not be XLR. But I prefer to just do a wireless hop because we're going to be outside versus running a cable. I don't know where the mixing board will be relative to my position. I think I'm the only video camera, covering the event. So presser on sticks, and then I'm going to go spray a bunch of B-roll that'll be a mix of sticks. And on the shoulder, planning to do all of it with the 28 to 135, excuse me. Probably don't need the eyebrow, but I'll show up with it and then I'll just remove it if it's in the way. We may do some man on the street style interviews. I'm set up for stick mic. I should pre-program a belt pack with a lav mic so I can switch over. Yeah, those Sony lav mics are those boxes up there. All right, I'll do that right now. And I just discovered, so I'm running a Genus dovetail with this brand new MoveCam bridge plate. And I just discovered the hard stop on the front of the dovetail, this little set screw, is too short. So this thing will slide right off the front end of the plate and fall to the floor. So once again, I didn't follow Mr. Bell's advice. He told me when you buy this, just buy the MoveCam dovetail to go with it. It's cheap enough, just buy it for the peace of mind. Yeah, I didn't listen to him because I got multiple ARRI, Genus, and wooden camera. Interestingly, I haven't tested the ARRI plate, but the wooden camera ARRI compatible dovetails do not mate with this MoveCam bridge, which I think is what Chris was explaining to me if I was not being so thick-headed and had just listened to him. All right, first ride on the cart. Looks pretty good up there. Learn from my mistakes. Before you put a camera on a plate in a moving vehicle with all the vibration, be sure to thread lock all your tie-down screws with medium strength thread lock. This is the Harbor Freight brand. Very inexpensive. It's a couple dollars for a bottle, or you can buy the more expensive stuff should you like, but don't do red. You'll never get it off. Requires a torch, and you don't want to be putting a torch on your camera. When I was a student, I was a terrible note taker, but for work, I've gotten efficient at writing down the things I know I'm going to forget. Recent example, 4 weeks on the road traveling for this award show, I had to convert my package from van drivable location configuration to Pelican cases that I got to check on airplanes. So I have this pack list I started in year 1 on this show, and I just modify it each year. And then when 12 months have gone by and it's time to pack again, I don't have to spend half a day stressing, pulling and testing and verifying I'm not forgetting any mission critical items. So I've got a checklist here by case, my carry-on spinner, the camera case that gets checked, lighting case that gets checked, tripod case. So 4 cases to cover 2 cameras, gimbal, tripod, interview lighting, and audio. And then once I get on the road, I use the same note to PDF scan any expenses that I need to bill back to clients. And then any receipts I failed to capture or they're in email form, I just note it at the bottom. And then as we're working, like each day on location, I'll note up at the top of the note, like all the people client side that we meet on that day and the talent we're interviewing. I write down their names here so that I can refer to it as we're going, because every day it's new faces and it takes me a few days to remember new names. And on this show, it's new people every day. And then any other notes, or if there's a piece of gear that's missing, I put it on the top of the list here. So when I go home on the weekend to reset, I can add that to the kit